So we're going back to our prompt because we had some people who were in and out. But we're looking at our DBQ, and these is the actual documents you will see on your DBQ. Again, we're taking it through the steps. We see that says most historians states that one of the overarching catalysts with the Civil War resides with the issue of slavery. Is that true? Yes. When everything comes down, everything narrows down to slavery. But it could be justified. However, it could be justified other issues ignited the sectional differences. When I look at political parties, did political parties ignite the issue? Yes, because once the Free Soilers take the stance on slavery, does that cause other parties to take on the issue? What is that party that will eventually divide over this issue? Democrats, which will allow for who to win? Republicans, and when they promise that if a Republican wins, what are they going to do? Doesn't that cause a civil war?
Yeah.
Can I even look at westward expansion, which we did on this document? As we move west, we try to maintain that sectional balance when it comes between free and slave. Does that eventually lead to the Civil War? Can I look at two states being a cause of it? What are the two states that are looking as a cause that I could possibly refer to? California when it tips the balance, and what else? Kansas. Okay, so do y'all see? This is what I was trying to explain to other classes. We are going to be looking at different lenses. Like, if we did not have political parties that took on the issue of slavery, would we have had the Civil War? No. If we did not have to move west, would we have ever had the issue of slavery come up that led to the Civil War? No. So I am looking at these other issues. Okay? Yes, we will talk about slavery within the issue, but the reaction of each side to it is what causes the war, right? So as we move west, we know the Northerners prefer the states to be what? Free. As we move west, we know the Southerners prefer the states to be what? And we know their reactions. And it's their reactions that will cause the eventual disunion. Okay? So do y'all understand, within this essay, will you be talking about slavery? Yes, but you're going to do it through these lenses of religion, westward expansion, tariffs. So what we're going to look at is document. We did this one, right? Okay, we're on E. So this is Senator Daniel Webster's speech to the Senate on March 7th. So it says, Mr. President, I speak today not as a Northerner, but as an American. Okay, so, okay, I will state one complaint of the South, that there has been found at the North, among individuals and among legislators of the North, a disinclination to perform fully their constitutional duties in regard to the return of persons bound to service who have escaped into the free states. I'm going to stop there. What is going on in this sentence? Slaves, returning of slaves, right? There you go. Let's write that little portion. The North is not returning slaves. I want y'all to be really careful on this, because this is not the fugitive slave law yet. Okay, I know it says 1850, right? That's when we get the compromise. But this is just talking about the Southerners not getting what returned to them. They're slaves. Well, how are they fleeing north? What could we also mention historically? We could talk about Underground Railroad. Historically, also, what could we mention? Who else is helping these people up north? It's a group of people, abolitionists, right? Why is it the South? Tell me their reason why they're so concerned historically of why their slaves are not being returned to them. They can't buy anymore because we can't import, right? Are they very expensive? Yes. Okay. So we know that historically. So let's keep on going. He says, in that respect, it is my judgment that the South is right and the North is wrong. So He's a northerner. Who is he siding with? The slave owners. He says that's wrong. They should be returned. Okay? So do y'all get his next part? He says the returning of the slaves is wrong. The not returning of the slaves is wrong. There we go. He says, I hear, are y'all ready for the next part?
We're ready for this.
Okay, I hear with pain and anguish the word secession, especially when it falls from the lips of those who are eminently patriotic and known to the country and known all over the world for their political service. So why is he hurt? Okay, they're patriotic, they're Southerners, right? I'm going to go back and show you something from what we've talked about on a previous PowerPoint. Who is this guy who's giving this speech? Daniel Webster. These are the three compromisers. Do y'all remember these guys? Daniel Webster, who else? Henry Clay, and then this guy, Calhoun. Who has, of these three guys, who has made the argument of secession before? John C. Calhoun. So he says, it pains me and anguish me to hear very patriotic people screaming the word secession. Who do you think he's heard the word secession from? John C. Calhoun. Do y'all now have some historical situation? Okay, let me do a little bit more. John C. Calhoun has come up with this idea, leave slavery alone, return the runaways, right? Restore the sectional balance, elect 2 presidents. What's the date of this document? March 7th, 1850. On March 7th, Daniel Webster gives a speech called the March of Seven speech, where he is saying that we need to give a reasonable concession to the South. What is that concession he's trying to get? A strong fugitive slave law. What he's talking about is the slaves are fleeing north, they're not being returned. So do y'all now get his purpose? His purpose is to get what law? The fugitive slave law. Okay, so that's his purpose. Let's write that down. He's trying to get a fugitive slave law. In his March 7th speech, which we are reading right now, he said it will help strengthen the Union, and he believes that both sides should compromise. Okay, so let me go back to the speech. Okay, are y'all getting stuff now? You're like, oh yes, we've talked about this. I remember this. So, he says, it pains me to hear the word secession. Where have they come up with that idea of secession before? Where has John C. Calhoun said that? South Carolina Exposition. So is he going back to things? Okay. He says, peaceful secession, sir, in your eyes and mine is never destined to see that miracle. I hold the idea of separation of these states that are free to form one government and those that are slaveholding to form another as morally impossible. So what does he feel about his separation? It's not possible, right? So he believes secession is wrong and it hurts him, right? And he believes separation is what? Wrong. So what do we have to do to stop secession and to stop them from leaving? Give them a compromise, right? So this whole historical situation is about the compromise of what year? 1850. Do y'all have some info about the compromise of 1850? What does the North get? Remember, they're compromising. They get California as what? Free. What does the South get? The fugitive slave law. And then we get popular sovereignty in the Mexican cession. Texas gets 10 million. Are you now giving me some historical situation when you describe that compromise of 1850? Okay, I know y'all writing the compromise of 1850 in historical situation, right? So who do you think his intended audience Who is he speaking to?
The South.
The South, and they're saying, look, we see this, right? But do you also think he's speaking to Northerners to give in? Yes. He's also speaking to Northerners that they have to give in. Because if they don't give in, what's eventually going to happen? It's going to split. His purpose is to get that compromise, right? Keep the union together. His point of view. Is he being a Northerner or a Southerner? He's being a moderate, right? Trying to bring both sides together. And have we seen Clay do this time and time again? Yes, right? But in the document it says, I'm trying to be an American. And that's being moderate. Can we quote that point of view? No. Okay, so let's look at, is there anything I need to go over? Back of historical situation, intended audience, purpose, and point of view. Is there anything? Okay, so let's look at our categories. Is this belief? No. Is this America and the world? Not yet. Geography and environment? No. Politics and power? Yes, most definitely. Identity? There's a regional identity, yeah, but what's stronger? Politics or regional identity? Politics. Is this people in movement and migration? Possibly if I talk about what? The few underground runaway slaves, Underground Railroad, right? Is this economy? Are they talking about loss of property that would help? Yeah, okay, it's very weak. What's our strongest category? Politics, okay. So let's look at our next document. Oh, yay. We know this document. Okay. Where does this document come out of? Alright, this is Brooks versus Sumner, right? So, Brooks versus Sumner. Okay, you could put it, yes, Brooks versus Sumner, because illustration by, this is the Brooks versus Sumner document. Okay. Do y'all know who's who?
Brooks is on top. So
Brooks is on top, right? Brooks, Preston Brooks is on top. He's the one beating, right? Who's the one on the bottom? Sumner. So identify those people if you need to.
It's Charles Sumner.
Charles Sumner and Preston Brooks. So this is Preston Brooks right here. Preston Brooks, and he's from where? South Carolina. And then Charles Sumner is from where? Massachusetts. So we know the description of this document would be Preston Brooks is beating Charles Sumner, right? Okay. But now let's go through the historical situation. We know what the document is. This is us putting it in our own words versus drawing it out. Okay. Preston Brooks is beating up Charles Sumner. Historically, what is going on historically that it has led to this little feud?
The stuff in Kansas.
Okay, something in Kansas. What's going on? Oh, flooding Kansas. Okay, so let's go back a little bit further. Why has Kansas come up?
Because
The dude with the railroads. Okay, Stephen Douglas wants to organize Kansas so he could build a railroad to go through where? To go to where? California to get what? Gold. Are you giving me historical situation now? Okay, so Stephen Douglas is trying to organize a railroad, so he's trying to organize Kansas so he could build this railroad to get to California. Do y'all see? Y'all have a plethora of information. You're describing it. You're giving the historical situation. And why is this an issue? Why did it eventually get to this? Because of the idea of what? Popular sovereignty. He introduces the idea of popular sovereignty. So the Southerners think that Kansas would be what? Slave. And then Northerners are trying to make Kansas what? Free. And has it brought out the worst of our nation? Yes. Tell me some things that Charles Sumner would be mentioning about how Kansas is a bad thing that gets Preston Brooks upset. What?
He calls the southern border.
Oh, he calls out the border ruffians who were doing what? Voting often and raiding and then illegally voting. You know, they were just so happy to vote that they voted extra, right? Okay, he says they were vile. Okay, who else could he mention? The pro-slavery people who are burning up a city. John Brown, who's doing what? Hacking to death people, right? He is bringing up all of the bad of Kansas. And amidst of this, he insults one state. What's that state? South Carolina. Okay, so do I need to go back through all the vile stuff that he's mentioned in his speech? Okay. Y'all are writing it down for your future self, so your future self could be happy with your past self. Okay. Do we know, this isn't a magazine. Do we know who the intended audience of the magazine is? No. Do we know the point of view of the magazine? Do we know the purpose of the magazine? So what is our strongest category here? Historically, do we have a lot to talk about Kansas and how it leads to this? Can we talk about how this event shows how inflamed our sections are, which will cause a civil war? That our politicians can't even be civil. Could you even go back to saying how each state re-elects these guys? And how our states are not inflamed to elect people who are essentially egging on a civil war. So do y'all see, y'all's analysis is going to be explaining how each side reacted to what was going on. And by them reacting differently, does that now cause the disunion that will eventually lead to the Civil War? That is your analysis. It's the multiple viewpoints of this on how we are getting to a civil war. How do y'all feel about this document? Okay, so now let's look at our categories. Is this economy? No. Is this peopling, movement, and migration?
No.
They were moving to where? Kansas. Is this peopling, movement, and migration? Yes. Because if they weren't moving to Kansas, would we have had this issue? No. Identity. Okay, if we want to talk about how they feel about that sectional balance, we could use that as an argument. Politics and power? Yes. Is this geography? Is this America and the world? Is this beliefs? Okay. So, politics and migration. Okay. So this guy, his name is Stephen Douglas. Oh, do we know this guy? This guy has set up what problem that we just talked about? Kansas, Nebraska, because he wanted to organize what? A railroad. Was it just for America or was it for his pocketbooks? His pocketbook. So we're familiar with this guy, right? This guy started the fight in the other image. So this is the Freeport Doctrine. So what are we going to name this document? The Freeport Document. Do we know something about this document that happened in 1858?
It's a response to a question.
Oh, Abraham Lincoln, because they're competing for what? Lincoln and him are competing for the Senate seat in Illinois. Where would I put that? Lincoln and him are competing for a Senate seat. Historical situation.
Isn't it in Illinois, right?
It's in Illinois, yeah. let's read through this document. So we got some historical situation, but we're gonna read through the document. It says, the next question propounded to me by Mr. Lincoln is, can the people of a territory in any lawful way, against the wishes of any citizens of the United States, exclude slavery from their limits prior to the formation of their state constitution? So his question is popular sovereignty or what? Dred Scott. That's the question he's proposing. Lincoln is asking him who it will rule. Is it the people through popular sovereignty, or is it through the Dred Scott? It says, I answered empathetically, as Mr. Lincoln has heard me answer 100 times from every stump in Illinois, that it is my opinion that the people of a territory can, by lawful means, exclude slavery from their limits prior to the formation of a state constitution. So what is his response? He responds popular sovereignty. It says, Mr. Lincoln knew that I have answered this question over and over again. He heard me argue the Nebraska bill on the principle over the state in 1854, 1855, and in 1856. And he has no excuse for pretending to be in doubt as to my position on that question. It is matters not what the Supreme Court may hereafter decide as to the abstract question whether slavery may or may not go into a territory under the Constitution. The people have by lawful means to introduce it or exclude it as they please, for the reason that slavery cannot exist a day or an hour anywhere unless it is supported by the local police regulations. Those police regulations can only be established by the local legislators. And if the people are opposed to slavery, they will elect representatives to that body who will by unfriendly legislation effectually prevent the introduction of it to their midst. If on any contrary they are for it, their legislation will favor its extension. Hence, no matter what the decision of the Supreme Court may be on the abstract question, still the right of the people to make slave a free territory is perfect and complete under the Nebraska bill. I hope Mr. Lincoln deems my answer satisfactory on that point. So he says, who has the ultimate right to determine slavery? The people through their what? Local legislation. He says the people, if they want to vote it down, they will have legislation that will vote it down. If the people are for slavery, they will create legislation for slavery. So he's saying the people are powerful because they will create the legislation. So we know that this is the Lincoln-Douglas debate. We know that now he defends popular sovereignty, and what's going to happen in this election historically? He will win the election for the Senate seat. But historically, how does this speech here cause the Civil War? It further splits the Democrats, right? Now the Northern Democrats believe in what? Popular sovereignty, and then the Southern Democrats dislike the Northern Democrats because they believe in what? Dred Scott. And his endorsement of this will cause the Democratic Party in 1860 to do what? Split. Okay, so can I possibly have a whole document about a whole paragraph about political parties? I know we have politics and power, but can I chop it up and looking at political parties and how they're doing with stuff? leading to the Civil War. Okay? Who's the intended audience of this? Think about it. We're in where? Illinois, and what are they arguing for? And so who are they speaking to? The people of Illinois, the constituents of Illinois, right? So what's Douglas' purpose? To win the Senate seat, right? What is his point of view? But his point of view is defend of what? The defense and popular sovereignty. So, is this belief systems? Because if I talk about Northern and Southern, right, that our Democrats have different belief systems that causes them to split. Haven't we talked about sometimes that our politics is reflected by our belief systems? So if I wanted to have a whole paragraph on political parties, I could talk about how the belief systems of those political parties impact the Civil War, right? So I could blend that category together. So this is entirely true. Is this America and the world? No. Is this geography and the environment? No. Is this politics and power? Yes. Is this identity? Yes. Regionally, we have different regions that are forming about ideas. Is this peopling, movement, and migration? Remember, if they move into the territories, right? So is this peopling, movement, and migration? Yes. Is this economy? Is there some categories that this is stronger? Yes. And we're going to be looking at on Monday when we come back. We're gonna have a little chart, and we're gonna chart out our documents. I know I have one more document, but we're gonna save that for Monday, okay? So